Did you know Croc Legend of the Gobbo started off as a Yoshi game for the Super Nintendo called Yoshi Racing? We tried to find out as much as we could about the mysterious origin story for Croc as we continue in part 2 of our interview with the Croc Remaster developers, this time covering a ton of questions presented by all of you. Before we get to it though, make sure to check out part 1 if you haven't already, as we covered a ton there as well. Otherwise, sit back and enjoy part 2 of our discussion starting now. And probably the most common question we had, the one that everyone was asking was, when's it coming out? We know it's coming out in Q1 of this year. Is there any more information about that?
That's a Mike question.
I think that's a Scott question.
Yeah.
Scott, when's it coming out? No, I'm kidding.
Yeah,
all right.
Andre, what do you think? When should it come out?
Well, I think it should come out right now. The moment this video drops is when people should be playing it.
It's actually available right now. No.
Wow, you're welcome, everyone. You're welcome.
No. It will be done when it's done.
Okay.
So we did announce, I think in December, like we had originally said Q4, and then in December we said we are going to make sure that this is done right.
Right.
And so, what we really didn't want to do was launch with things that we were not happy with. So we had some chance to go back and fix a few things. And some things that the community even pointed out to us. Every time we drop a video, if it was a trailer or we did videos like old versus new or trailers with features, like here's some of the new features, the internet would light up with people pointing out bugs to us.
Right.
And it was great. I mean, it was stuff that we maybe in some cases we missed. Or people would say, hey, why is there a seam in this wall? Or, hey, the audio doesn't reverb in the caves. Mm-hmm. Well, in the PC version of the game, there was no reverb because PC sound cards couldn't handle it in 1997. And so we were like, oh, well, we worked from the PC source code. And so we missed it.
Right.
And people pointed out. So we went back and fixed it. And so, we still had, a little bit of work to do in December. So, we said we're not going to launch something that has bugs or is not, that we're not happy with. And so we've continued to work, but work very close.
Next up, we have a question from DeAndre who asks, what was the most exciting thing that the developers, you guys, look forward to while developing the remaster?
Being done.
You're almost there, right?
Yeah.
As we discussed.
For me, it's that all of the people that played it are looking forward to seeing it again. They were kids, now they're adults, now they might have their own kids, they want to introduce it to their kids.
Right.
So it's great that it's going to find a whole new audience. Not only like new kids that will play it, but also the platforms are completely different now. So the fact that it can run on today's platforms is a big deal.
Yeah, and the timing seems great, and I feel like there's a hunger right now for this kind of classic gameplay experience.
Yeah, and also I think remasters are really like a big thing now, and people are realizing that there are these great games from 20 years ago, and maybe you don't want to play it on a PlayStation 1, right? It's hard to get a PlayStation 1 running. My TV doesn't have the right connectors anymore,
right.
So you have to buy an adapter or something. And so it still holds up. That's the part about it that I love. I mean, we went to Jez's house and his kids sat down. We literally just left it in the living room and went to go have lunch. And the kids found it and started playing it. And an hour later they were still playing it. And
wow,
I was kind of surprised. I was like, oh, this is before we greenlit it, right? So I was like, you guys like this? Like, oh, cool.
I think there's something so lovely about Croc is that, I hear a lot from people, especially these days, that, new games are quite complex, quite tricky to get into if you're not really much of a games player. And I think with Croc, it has, obviously so much in it, but it also has at its core sort of a simplicity of playing it that I think a lot of people can sort of pick it up, and immediately you press something, you start running, and then you press another thing, you jump, and then you're already like partway into it. And I think it's what I love about Croc is that it's very accessible. I think even today, especially, I think it's probably quite welcome in that regard.
Yeah, I think that's why it appealed to me, again, as one who missed it at the time. I just was able to hop into it and get right into it.
There's no tutorial because it doesn't need it, right? And
exactly.
Some modern games will have 40 minutes just to like learn how to play the game, and I don't have time for that.
I can't. Yeah, I can't. I have very little patience these days for hour-long tutorials. So thank you for not having that in Croc.
Yeah, no problem.
Turbo Granny asks, are there any quality of life improvements getting added to the game? So we've already touched on, of course, the improved graphics, the improved controls, though the original, in both cases, are still there. But is there anything else we've missed besides the Crocpedia we mentioned as well?
Yeah, I mean, quality of life really is about the controls and the camera. I mean, that's the biggest, and obviously it looks nicer.
Also, you have to remember that the original game shipped on disc and loaded slowly. So every time you move from one level to another level, like you walk through a door or whatever, you waited a while for it to load the next level up. You don't have to do that nowadays. Now it's instant, and it makes it actually feel much more fluid.
It's also double the frame rate now, right? Isn't it more reactive?
Yeah, I mean, the frame rate is definitely much higher, and on a PS5, I think we have a lot of extra horsepower because it is it's not Call of Duty, right? It doesn't have Croc is still a cartoon at the end of the day. I mean, don't get me wrong, it wasn't like we flipped a switch and it was suddenly running at 500 frames per second. Because we do have all these, upgraded graphics and all the new shaders and things like that. So, there is always a challenge on any game to keep the frame rate where we want it.
Right.
And a lot of times there's a little bit of back and forth, right? Because you add some things and the frame rate drops, and then you have to take some things out. Because frame rate's pretty important.
Yeah, it's running a lot higher resolution than it used to too. So you are spending some of that horsepower by running a lot higher. Was it 320 by 240 or something?
It was 320 by 240 on a PlayStation 1, and now you can run at 4K, on your PC or on PS5 you can run 4K, so that's something we have to always kind of keep an eye on, and not let things get out of control. I mean, I've worked on remasters where you just start adding things, and suddenly it's like the frame rate is 10. You're like, oh, okay, maybe we did too much. But on PC, we tested on the really low end, like Intel integrated video cards, and on the lower end ones, you still have to turn a few things off. But we do have some options that allow you to play the game on, essentially like a business laptop or that $400 PC from Costco. And so we were pleasantly surprised that it runs great.
And yeah, it's going to be available on, I believe, every major platform, including Nintendo Switch, right? So
yeah, I mean, it's a perfect game for a Switch, so yeah.
Great. And kind of to that point of talking about changing things in the remaster, and we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but Born Loka asks, how difficult is it to maintain the spirit of the original game in the process of making a remastered version? How can you not disappoint gamers in the final product?
I mean, I think 100% of that is because we worked from the original code and the original assets.
Right.
So fundamentally, underneath the polished graphics is the original game.
And that's why you can just toggle it with a button, right? That's why that works.
Right. I mean, there's a little bit of work to make that toggle work, right? Because we do have to have those original textures still there.
Right.
And we also have there's like a retro mode, and there's something called VGA mode, which cranks the resolution all the way down. And that's kind of a neat little
thing. And then like monitor simulation mode, like
it adds scan lines.
Yeah. In the old days,
like an old TV. I mean, you don't really see it anymore, but if you had an old TV, you see the scan lines, right? So, but really, I mean, fundamentally, like we had to have the original code and assets to make that work.
Right. So would you say that's the most authentic way to play at that lower resolution with the scan lines enabled, or do you have a preference?
It's the most authentic, but I mean, the best experience is going to be crank it up.
Right.
I might have to go to the old school look just for a bit, just to get that nostalgia kick.
All the retro graphics, including the original Croc model you helped make.
Yeah, it'd just be fun to see it like that for a little bit, and then I'll be like, all right, now switch all the cool stuff back on.
Games Writer asks, will the cheats from the original game work in the remaster, like the password function?
I'm 99% sure that the cheats are there, and the speedrun community was desperate for us to keep something called a hover jump in.
Okay.
Which is something you can do. I can't do it, but there's some complex controls. You're jumping and you're turning, and somehow you end up hovering, and you can like breeze through the levels faster. And we accidentally left that in.
Speedrunners will be right at home with this version.
Yeah, and we have some of those. I had mentioned earlier. We have some people who are from that community are kind of playtesting the game for us, and so they've given us the kind of seal of approval. They're happy with what we've done.
That's awesome. King Semirot asks, might we expect a Croc 2 remaster if this game sells well, or even a new game?
That's you, Jess.
That's me. Okay. As I said before, we hope it will do well, and fingers crossed it will. Looks like we're getting, great feedback and support online. So yeah, that when we finish Croc 1 and it's out, if the market wants it, we're going to do Croc 2.
All right, that's exciting. Let's hope it sells well.
Anyone watching who wants to see that happen, please subscribe to our Twitter. Like, subscribe, click the bell. Pre-order, wish list, whatever you can do. We need the fans to kind of come out and help us, and so we can do more of these.
And to that point, this kind of ties into the previous question. Josh Gaming asks, is there a chance we could see a Croc 3 in the future? Because I believe it was originally planned back in the day, but never came to fruition. Obviously, we're not announcing anything here, but could that ever happen?
We certainly wouldn't do a Croc 3 before a Croc 2. So let's release Croc 1, and fingers crossed everyone will love it and buy it. Then we'll do Croc 2. If people still want more, then why not? Why wouldn't we do Croc 3? But that's a lot harder because there is no Croc 3 that exists. So that would be a wholly new original game.
Yeah, I mean, look, I hope we do it. And I hate to sound like a sales pitch, but if you want Croc 3, please go buy Croc 1. Buy 2 copies, one for a friend, one for your girlfriend or whatever. 3 copies. Buy a box set.
Exactly. You heard it here. If you want that Croc 3, well, you gotta work your way there. So, Pro2B Gamer maybe asks, why isn't it on Steam?
There are business reasons, and we are very happy with our partnership with Good Old Games, and they're committed to preserving old games. And I think that there's a lot of reasons why that was a great partnership for us. And that's all I can say right now.
Koi Wazoo asks, especially given how Croc was, recently in Astrobot, as you mentioned, would you like to see Croc in Smash Brothers one day?
I don't even dream that high, but I mean, yeah, that'd be awesome. I think that'd be super fun. If anyone from Nintendo is watching this, please give us a call. We'd love to work that out. Look, hey, my joke is if we do Croc 2, maybe Astrobot could be a cameo.
Astro Croc.
Yeah. There you go.
I'm sure Sony would give us permission for that.
I'm sure.
And Mega Dude asks, is it true Croc was originally a Yoshi game, or is that how it started off over 27 years ago?
That's a bit of a long story, but yeah, so we were working on a multi-game deal with Nintendo, and that included Star Fox, Stunt Race, and Star Fox 2, which took like 20-30 years to come out. There you go. Oh, you've got Stunt Race.
I'm the biggest fan of this game.
Nice.
So we did those games for Nintendo, and then we wanted to do the world's first 3D platform game, and we came up with a concept for Yoshi Racing, which was a 3D Mario world, that looked as you would have imagined a 3D platform version of Mario would have looked like, but with the Yoshi character. We knew Nintendo would never let us use the Mario character, but we thought there was a chance that they'd let us use the Yoshi character. So we pitched it to them. We mocked up a PC version of it, kind of doing something, and some videos, and they loved it. They loved the idea. They loved the visuals. They loved the interpretation of a 3D platformer. But they said no. No one's going to use our characters. outside of our company. So that was a no, and they apologized later for that and said sorry that we didn't let you do that. But we really wanted to do a 3D platform game, so we just had to start from scratch and say, okay, it's not with Nintendo characters. We'll come up with our own characters, and we learned a lot from working with Nintendo. We learned how to be more creative because we were a very tech shop at the time, and and we always did first-person games, and Nintendo always did third-person games, and so we learned a lot from the experience, and then we designed a whole original set of characters and the Croc world, and yeah, so that was the transition.
That's kind of crazy. Yeah, it's fun hearing about the history of how these classic games came to be. So are there any remnants of Yoshi racing in Croc? Like anything
none at all. Okay. No, it was a, that was, we tried to sell it to them. They weren't going to have it. So we just started from scratch. But we did have, there was a version of Croc that we switched into the Yoshi racing prototype, but it was a completely different Croc. It was a Croc you would not recognize. It was designed by Marcus Morgan, and it looks nothing like our cute, friendly, fun, very, very quirky Croc. It was yeah. So, and that was like a previous Croc that never continued.
So Scott wouldn't recognize that Croc then.
No, not.
He was on two legs, but that was the only similarity. He was not a cartoony looking Croc. He was like, he was like an upright crocodile.
It's funny because I came on to Croc as it was Croc, at the very beginning of that, and I had no idea about the Yoshi thing. So people were mentioning it like years later and asking me about it. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm sorry. And then the sort of the story came from there and seemed like it was maybe more official. And then I was like, I don't know anything about this. I was, in the dark. So I was working on another project before I moved over. But just a little tidbit. Something's interesting about Croc is when I started on it, like I said, we weren't sure about the power of PlayStation, but when I started building like environment pieces, I started building like sort of walls and things. We started off with like a trench style kind of game, because we were looking at stuff that was starting to come out in the magazines and things like Crash Bandicoot, stuff like that. And then, we thought, well, maybe we need sort of a focused game where we're sort of rendering so much on screen, but it was so powerful that we started, expanding, and it became the Croc that we now know, with like large rooms and large environments all interconnected and sort of a much bigger world. So yeah, it was kind of interesting seeing that change too.
That is interesting, especially, like I said earlier, like people that you guys were in that revolutionary period of like figuring out what a 3D game could be, and we saw multiple different instances of this, like Crash, as you said, which was essentially a 2D type of gameplay just in a 3D environment.
Yeah, it was on rails, so it was a very different kind of game. Yeah,
exactly. And then Croc is a more open type of 3D, similar to Mario 64. Which really, I think, really kind of showed the potential of what you can do with this new medium. I'm just curious just a little bit more about, Yoshi Racing. Does that still exist in any form? Like, is that program, is that anywhere to be found? Or
I wish we had, like, if I ever managed to find my backup of the Argonaut hard drive, then you never know, we might find it. But no, we've searched everywhere, we can't find it. So I don't think anyone still has a copy of it. But yeah, I would love to see that again, but it's been like 30 years since I've seen that.
That'd be crazy. And was it designed for the Super FX chip then? Was that the plan at the time, or?
Yeah, I mean that was, we designed the Super FX chip for Nintendo, and we were doing 3D games on the Nintendo back then. We were the only people doing 3D games back then.
Right. Yeah, it was crazy seeing Star Fox and Star Race FX running on a game system that had previously only done largely 2D type of experiences. It was kind of like an early glimpse into the future that would become Croc, for instance. And just real quick, is there anything else about Yoshi Racing that you remember looking back on? Like, was it an actual like racing game then? Like, were you racing multiple Yoshis, or what was the?
No, there weren't multiple Yoshis. I mean, at the time we only had Yoshi in it, so there wasn't much racing. It was a 3D platformer called Yoshi Racing, but there wasn't any racing in it. It was you you were Yoshi walking around a 3D platform world. I remember the Mario underground lava kind of cavern type world. I mean, it was gorgeous. It was exactly as you'd imagine. Like Super Mario World was my favorite game. That was the number 4 on the SNES, and it looked like that, but in 3D. So it was cool. But anyway, we threw it away, started from scratch, and that's what became Croc.
Right. That brings us to today, where we have this fantastic looking remaster coming out in the near future, which is super exciting. So is there anything else that you want us to know, that you want our audience to know about the remaster of Croc, that that you want to reiterate or we haven't touched on yet?
Please buy a copy for your friends.
Yeah. In my case, I would, there's a commercial decision on what platforms we have put it on, because they're the platforms that we think people want. But if you want it on other platforms, for instance, I love my iPhone and my iPad and my Mac computer. We're not doing it on those, but if you want it on those platforms, and there are enough people that want it on those platforms, we would love to do it.
Have you, Scott, anything you want to leave our audience with?
No, I'm just excited for people to play it. I want to hear all the stories of like nostalgia and also fresh experiences. People from all walks of life kind of coming to play the game, and I just think it has such a charm about it that I think a lot of people can enjoy it, old and new. And I think I'm very excited to see the reactions and talk to them about it.
Especially because we have social media these days. You didn't have it back in the original days of Croc, right? So you're going to get that feedback immediately, and that's going to be, I think, pretty exciting for you all, right?
Yeah, I think the other. Sorry, go on, Mike. Sorry.
No, it's exciting. It's also a little scary.
Yeah.
You're right. You do get that feedback instantly, and you get real-time bug reporting also.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, current game players are very tech savvy these days. It's so interesting seeing people's comments about things not looking right in games and being very specific about it. And the industry and the world's changed a lot since Croc came out. So we've got much more of an eye on people's reactions to things and people playing stuff now. So it's going to be fascinating. Back in the day when it came out on a disc, it was like you'd have a couple of mates down the pub saying, "Oh yeah, I played that game. It's pretty fun." But now you've got social media and everything. It's going to be fascinating. So I'm excited.
Yeah, I am too. I can't wait to see everyone's reaction to the game when it officially launches. Like I said, I've been playing it. I've been having a blast with it, and it seems like there's been a lot of love put into this remaster of a game that people grew up with. So I think people are going to be really excited to play it themselves once it releases here.
Yeah. So thank you.
On that note, thank you so much, Jez, Mike, and Scott for joining us here. It's been a blast from the past to discuss Croc with all of you, and everyone should stay tuned for the final game once it's released here sometime in the presumably near future. And I can't wait for everyone to experience it themselves. So thanks again for joining us. It's been so fun talking about the history and the and everything that's gone into the remaster of Croc. And again, can't wait for everyone to play it themselves. So
thanks,
Thank
Andrew.
you.
Yeah,
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Andre, take care.